The tall horn-eater put a hand on Kaladin's shoulder.
You do good work here. I am thinking that in a few weeks, these men will be yours.
We're bridgemen, Rock. We don't have a few weeks. If I take that long winning them over, half of us will be dead.
Is not a happy thought.
That's why we have to win over the other men now.
But how?
Kaladin looked up at the dangling ladder, shaking as the men climbed up. Only 4 could go at a time, lest they overloaded.
Meet me after we're searched. We're going to the camp market.
Very well.
Rock swung on to the ladder as earless Jacks reached the top.
What will be our purpose in this thing?
We're going to try out my secret weapon.
And what weapon is this?
Actually, it's you.
2 hours later, at Sala's first violet light, Rock and Kaladin walked back into the lumberyard. It was just past sunset, and many of the bridgemen would soon be going to sleep.
Not much time.
Kaladin gestured for Rock to carry his burden to a place near the front of Bridge 4's barrack. The large horn-eater set his burden down next to Teft and Doni, who had done as Kaladin had ordered, building a small ring of stones and setting up some stumps of wood from the lumberyard scrap pile. The wood was free for anyone to take. Even bridgemen were allowed. Some liked to take chunks to whittle. Kaladin got out a sphere for light. The thing Rock had been carrying was an old iron cauldron. Even though it was second-hand, it had cost Kaladin a fair chunk of the knobweed sap money. The horn-eater began to unpack supplies from inside the cauldron as Kaladin arranged some wood scraps inside the ring of stones.
Dunny, water if you please.
Doni ran off to fetch a bucket from one of the rain barrels. Rock finished emptying the cauldron, laying out small packages that had cost another substantial portion of Kaladin's spheres. He had only a handful of clear chips left. As they worked, Haber limped out of the barrack. He was mending quickly, though the other 2 wounded that Kaladin had treated were still in bad shape.
What are you up to, Kaladin?
Kaladin got a flame started.
Have a seat.
Haber did just that. He hadn't lost the near devotion he'd shown Kaladin for saving his life. If anything, his loyalty had grown stronger. Doni returned with a bucket of water, which he poured into the cauldron. Then he and Teft ran off to get more. Kaladin built up the flames, and Rock began to dice tubers and unwrapped some seasonings. In under a half hour, they had a roaring flame and a simmering pot of stew. Teft sat down on one of the stumps, warming his hands.
This is your secret weapon?
Have you known many soldiers in your life, Teft?
A few.
You ever known any who could turn down a warm fire and some stew at the end of a hard day?
Well, no. But bridgemen ain't soldiers.
That was true. Kaladin turned to the barrack doorway. Figures shifted inside the barrack, shadows moving. The door was open, and the scents of Rock's stew grew strong, inviting.
Come on. Remember why we live. Remember warmth. Remember good food. Remember friends and evenings spent around the hearth. You aren't dead yet. Storm you if you don't come out.
It all suddenly seemed so contrived to Kaladin. The stew an act of desperation. It was all just an attempt to briefly distract from the pathetic life he had been forced into. A figure moved in the doorway. Scar. Short, square-bearded and keen-eyed, stepped out into the firelight. Kaladin smiled at him. A forced smile. Sometimes that was all one could offer.
Let it be enough.
He dipped a wooden bowl into Rock's stew. Kaladin held the bowl toward Scar. Steam curled from the surface of the brownish liquid.
Will you join us? Please.
Scar looked at him, then back down at the stew.
I'd join the Night Watcher herself around a fire if there was stew involved.
Well, be careful. That's horn-eater stew. Might be snail shells or crab claws floating in it.
There is not. It's unfortunate that you have unrefined lowlander tastes, but I prepare the food such as I am ordered by our dear bridge leader.
Kaladin smiled as Scar sat down. Others trailed out after him, taking bowls, sitting. Some stared into the fire, not saying much, but others began talking quietly. At one point, Gaz walked past, eyeing them with his single eye, as if trying to decide if they were breaking any camp regulations. They weren't. Kaladin had checked. Kaladin dipped out a bowl of stew and held it toward Gaz. The bridge sergeant stalked away.
Can't expect too many miracles in one night.
The next morning, when Kaladin called for the bridgemen to rise, 3/4 of them piled out of the barrack. Everyone but the loudest complainers: Moash, Sigzil, Narm, and a couple of others. The ones who came to his call looked surprisingly refreshed, despite the long evening spent singing and eating. When he ordered them to join him in practice carrying the bridge, almost all of those who had risen joined him. Not everyone, but enough. He had a feeling that Moash and the others would give in before too long. They'd eaten his stew. Nobody had turned that down. And now that he had so many, the others would feel foolish not joining in. Bridge 4 was his.
Now, I just have to keep him alive long enough for that to mean something.